I'm Davy. I'm awesome. And welcome to Davy's Awesome Wrestling, where I review wrestling-related things all from the perspective of a fan, not an insider. So this week, I'm going to be reviewing a wrestling documentary that I've been waiting to review for a while. It's about time. This documentary came out in 2015, and it was released by Indie Rights Movies. Directed by Steve Yu, who co-produced it with Chris Corey. I'm talking about the documentary, The Resurrection of Jake the Snake. This is a documentary that, as a wrestling fan, if you haven't seen it, you've definitely heard of it. Like, so many clips from this documentary have gone viral. On the YouTubes, on the Facebooks, on the Twits, all over the place. And of course, there is a reason for that. Reason being, this is a very inspirational documentary. It starts out to where if you had no idea what this was about, you just sat down and started watching with somebody, you'd think it was just another wrestling documentary, because it starts out with the former peers of Jake Roberts talking about how great he was in his heyday. Guys like Chris Jericho, Steve Austin, Ted DiBiase, Gene Okerlund, rest in peace, Jim Ross, Jim Duggan, guys that are now in the business that were just fans of him in his heyday, like Adam Copeland, also known as Edge, Dustin Rhodes. The list goes on and on. I can't actually name every wrestler who contributed to this. Like I said, it opens with them praising him and talking about how great he was, but then going into how tragic things got for him. How his addictions had just caused him to spiral out of control to the point that he had nothing left. Basically had burned every bridge that he had in wrestling. WWE had pretty much disowned him. And how it all came to a bottoming out point in the infamous appearance he had in Lakewood, Ohio, where he showed up to an indie wrestling promotion that had drawn a pretty large crowd for an indie promotion of almost 700 people, and he was in no condition to perform. He was stumbling and drunk, cursing out the crowd, couldn't respond to the person he was working with in the ring, so they basically just punched him a couple times and pinned him in 30 seconds. Somebody else came in to try to save the show a little bit, fighting with him and brawling with him, telling him, hey, DDT me so the crowd will be happy, but he wasn't even coherent enough to do that. Pretty much every wrestling fan remembers that incident. It was all over TMZ for a while, and it was definitely all over the YouTubes. It's probably still on the YouTube, sadly. But it was that point that he had basically given up on wrestling, and then comes along his old friend, Diamond Dallas Page, who considered Jake the Snake one of his mentors when he first got into wrestling. How Page was just dead set of, we gotta save Jake the Snake, we can get him off of his addictions, we can get him in better shape, we can get his health back. He was dedicated to this, and Jake was on board, to where he convinced Jake to move in with him in Atlanta from Texas. And at this point in Jake's life, he was no longer a drug addict, but still very much an alcoholic. And of course, during the time of him living with Dallas Page and getting clean, there were setbacks. If you're hoping for that feel-good documentary where somebody just clicks and goes, that's it, I'm done, and they never touch it again, well, this ain't for you, because that's not what happens in it. During this documentary, he has a couple of setbacks. In it, he goes into his childhood and his insecurities, the kind of stuff that he self-medicated for, which later years, when the Dark Side of the Ring episode about his father came out, we kind of got more in depth of what was going on there, the abuse that he went through as a child, and again, all the insecurities it made him as a man, not to mention the pain he went through of telling himself he wasn't going to repeat those mistakes with his own children, and repeating the exact same mistakes he said he wasn't going to do, and it weighed heavy on him. But some of the encouraging things for him was thinking that basically every wrestling fan had written him off, and nobody cared about him anymore. Then all of a sudden he hurts his shoulder to the point that he does need surgery. It's no longer an option, but he has no insurance. He has no money left from his wrestling days. So they go on a fundraising website. They need to raise $9,200. And in one day they raised $7,000 of it. Took barely 2 days to get the money he needed for his surgery. Showing him that yes, the fans still were very much behind Jake the Snake Roberts. Then almost halfway into this documentary, because of the buzz behind it, people finding out on the internet how well Jake is doing, Diamond Dallas Page gets a text message from Sean Waltman, concerned for his buddy Scott Hall. Scott Hall, too, was just at a very, very low point. And, of course, in this documentary, we see one of the clips that has gone the most viral from this documentary of Jake and Dallas calling Scott Hall early in the morning and him answering extremely drunk, extremely incoherent, but ultimately deciding that, yes, he wants to come in and do the program that Jake is doing, because he's at that point, he just wants help. But before he can get into the whole DDP yoga routine, he needs hip surgery. They even show a part where he's trying to stretch, and you can hear his hip popping, and it's really loud. Like, seriously, Rice Krispies don't pop that much. And then again, in some point in this documentary, because of Jake getting clean and doing so good, the Cauliflower Alley Club inducts him into their Hall of Fame. And WWE, where he had burned bridges and they'd basically completely written him off, calls him up and invites him to be a part of Raw Old School. But it was still a big moment for him because Jake the Snake's goal in the beginning of getting clean was he wanted to be in the Royal Rumble. Just to be one of those legend entrants that we see almost every Royal Rumble, where somebody from the past comes out, gets a big pop, doesn't win, but still. Well, it didn't pan out for him. He did get a call from Triple H, who was head of talent relations at that point, telling him, sorry, but you're not going to be in the Royal Rumble. But you will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And this was 2014. Not only did he get inducted into the Hall of Fame, but he was inducted by his buddy Dallas Page. And in the same night, so was Scott Hall, who himself was getting clean, getting back into shape, and had been clean and sober for quite a while. As we know, earlier this year, due to health complications, we did lose Scott Hall. And it is reported that he may have fallen off the wagon earlier this year. It happens in addict recoveries. They can be clean for years and then just something happens. But for the most part, between 2013 and 2022, Scott Hall had cleaned himself up and was living his best life, connecting with his children, especially Cody Hall, and it was thanks to Diamond Dallas Page. And of course, even Jake the Snake Roberts, since this time, he's been clean and sober the entire time, and he's been living his best life. He's doing podcasts, he's doing appearances, he's in contract with AEW, managing Lance Archer. It truly is a resurrection story. It's like total opposite of the first time we ever got to see him in a documentary of Beyond the Mat, where after that documentary, you didn't feel good for Jake the Snake at all. In fact, you felt bad for the guy. In this one, the resurrection of Jake the Snake, it's a really good feeling for the guy. You feel uplifted. You feel excited for the guy. And it's a touching story that shows, quoting Dallas Page, dreams can come true if you're willing to put in the work, like it did for Jake the Snake. Like I said, it's a very heartwarming, very uplifting documentary. Some of you guys, if you watch it, you may get teary. But in my opinion, this documentary is fantastic. I know that by now, this documentary's been out since 2015. It's now 2022. A lot of wrestling fans have seen this, but there are still a large segment who haven't. So if you're a part of that segment that has not seen the resurrection of Jake the Snake, then I urge you to go out and watch the resurrection of Jake the Snake. Right now, you can watch it for free on Tubi. Highly recommend this documentary. So there you have it. That's my wrestling review this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit that little bell so you get notifications for when I post new videos, and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of the resurrection of Jake the Snake. Love you guys.